So, the famous God game, what is it like?
A land of innocence has no need for gods, until fate intervenes.
Keep away from the water!
Stop!
When people pray, a god is always born.
Help! Someone help
Help our
us!
child!
We call
Please,
to the
hear
heavens!
us!
The first act as a god is the rescue of a young child that decided to go swimming with the sharks. If you expect to be confronted with your first moral decision, you'll be disappointed, as the god always saves the child. However, there is no need for panic, as mass murder will soon be on the table. The village that the family belongs to reveals that they have been waiting for your arrival. They are a proud Norse tribe living in the land of Eden, a world that consists of many small islands inhabited by diverse cultures. The Norse villagers have built you a massive temple where they wish to worship you. In this temple you can also save and load the game, which isn't actually possible if the temple hasn't been built, so you better hope the game doesn't crash while the game is proceeding. If you had hoped that your reign of terror or benevolence started now, I've got some bad news for you, because instead you'll get tutorials. You'll better get used to them, because a large part of the game consists out of these. On the first island, you are also introduced to your conscience. There are two spiritual advisors that represent the different alignments that exist in the game, which, well, is good and evil. They act as instructors during the tutorial, they give warnings and hints throughout the game, and they give comedic relief when the player leaves the game for a moment.
Quick game of hide and seek, demon. You're on! 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming! Ready or not! And remember, the nasal passage is out of bounds.
If you manage to work out how to use the keyboard and your mouse, the game opens up a little more. Luckily, the game no longer railroads you into a specific behavior, as it did in the introduction. How you interact with the villagers and the world going forward is really up to you. There are many ways to interact with the world, but perhaps the most straightforward one will be your almighty hand. Directly replacing the mouse cursor is your right or left hand that can be used to manipulate the surrounding world. Whether you choose to throw away a villager as far as you can, or if you use it to pick up wood to assist the village, is really all up to you. Alternatively, you can also come back on the decision that was made for you earlier. That being said, there is of course a structured storyline that the player will follow, as even Molyneux himself admitted that an open world without a story would eventually be boring. Since I had so enjoyed discussing Lionhead Studios in the last video, I'll give you a little insight in how the studio described the storyline of Black and White. This epic tale with hundreds of different outcomes and moral dubious decisions really boils down to this. You are a god in the land of Eden, as I already mentioned. However, you're not the only one. An evil god called Nemesis wants to be the only god. That's kinda bad, since it means exterminating the other gods. that's it. You spend the whole game either chasing or fighting Nemesis. Well, Nemesis also has another god that works for him, so you'll also be chasing and fighting him. There's another point, and that is that if you want to destroy a god, you'll need 3 pieces of something called a creed. It's never really explained what it is, except that it's the source of your divine power, but you use the pieces anyway to defeat Nemesis at the end of the game. Look, it's not a bad story, but it's definitely not the epic tale we were promised. Then again, maybe we should forget those promises in the first place. Black and White is divided up into 5 islands. Each of these can be found in the land of Eden. They feature their own challenges and their own rewards, with the first 2 islands serving as tutorials to introduce the player to the game. Throughout the first island, you finish different types of challenges in an effort to open a grand gate. You could see this gate and the landscape behind it in my first video. When you finally pass through it, you are introduced for the first time to your very own creature. An ape, a cow or a lion. As is the motive of Black and White, you choose which of these creatures will become your avatar on Earth. While an intensive tutorial shortly follows, the introduction of the creature introduces the player to the biggest component of the game, and it is your bond and education of the creature that takes up the biggest part of your playing time. I'll go much more into detail on the creature later, but I thought it's important to mention since the creature is such an integral part of the game. When you move to the second island, you find yourself wedged between 2 gods fighting over the different villages that are scattered over the island. This island introduces new features like how to cast miracles, the worship of villagers, and how to expand your own settlements. Perhaps most important, the second island teaches you how to make proper use of your creature to convert new cultures and villages to your own influence. That being said, the game does not necessarily get easier with a smarter creature. On the contrary, Black and White does it best to keep you on your toes. If anything, having a dumb or untrained creature, and yes, there is a difference, will make your experience worsen over time. When the last of the tutorials have finally ended and you are believed to be ready to take on the world by leaving the second island, the status quo suddenly changes. For the duration of the third island, you lose control of your creature. Now this forces you to adapt to a different playstyle and look for alternative ways of progressing throughout the island. If you were relying on your creature a lot, this will shake things up, but if you didn't, honestly, not much changes. While rather difficult, it isn't impossible to beat this island, and it won't be long before you and your creature move on to the 4th island, where once again you find yourself in a position the game hasn't prepared you for. The 4th island is hell. The environment is doing its best to destroy you, your followers and your creature, meaning you work on a pretty restrictive time restraint. With fire raining from the sky, terrible dry thunderstorms that will set your village aflame, and hungry ogres that appear from the bushes to steal your villagers, you got your work cut out for you here. Now if you work quickly, make smart use of your creature, and you don't mind getting your hands dirty, any god can master these harsh challenges. That being said, if you have a misbehaving creature, don't have the patience to protect your village from the descending fireballs, or if you just don't want to hurt the ogres, it's actually possible that you will meet your end on this island. This is a smart, but also a bit of a cruel decision by Lionhead Studios, because if you did not put in the work in the last few islands, or if you're rushing through the story, your chances of victory become slimmer. That unfortunately also counts if you have a dumb creature. If you chose the tiger on the first island, it's too dumb to understand that it has to water the village in the case of celestial arson. With the 5th and final island, you will find this last part to be especially true. Here your goal is to defeat Nemesis, who has cursed your creature to slowly revert to the opposite of its personality and its alignment. If you had a well-fed, shining black-white cow that performs healing miracles on your followers, you now have an angry red minotaur with black horns that loves to stampede through your carefully organized village, slaughtering your followers by the dozens. Naturally, the curse can be lifted, but that will require skill, grace and again a fair bit of luck. If you don't pay any attention to your creature, however, it's not that much of a bother since you know how to play without it. But if you rely too heavily on it, you will be severely handicapped on the last island. This encourages the player to make less use of the creature, which shouldn't be the message that Lionhead Studios should be sending, since it's such a large part of the game. Anyway, this, in short, is true for the rest of the game as well. If you have done your due diligence, you will be able to defeat Nemesis and close the book on this epic sage, and proudly say that you have beaten Lionhead Studios Black and White. Now, all there is left for you to do is to do it all again. Now, I specifically want to mention this last part. Should you decide to rewrite history and start again on the first island where you saved the child from the sharks, you will find the option to take your creature along with you. After all, you've been through so much. Perhaps it would be wrong to leave it behind. For these videos, I played a very thorough playthrough that had a fat black-white cow with a great alignment. It was trained well and could handle different challenges. But as I mentioned in my last video, Lionhead Studios postponed the save load feature of the game to the last minute, and it took over 2 weeks to implement it. You know what happens if you choose to redo the game with a new creature? It overrides the creature in your save game as well. If you go back to any of the save games you made in the last few weeks, days or months, your creature has been replaced with a new one that has forgotten everything you taught it. What's the bloody point of a save game if when I go back it isn't the same as when I left it? My creature is now floating through the ethereal voids of my hard drive, never to return. Thank you, Peter Molyneux. Anyway, what if you desire to choose a new avatar to represent yourself? I mean, the ape looks pretty amazing if it's evil, and a good wolf looks good. How will the creature react to a different alignment? When you hover your hand above these options, you can't help but wonder, what else does the creature have to offer? In the next video, we'll look into what the creature is, how it learns, and how its artificial intelligence led the basis for Google's current AI research.